Thank you. Be seated. Welcome to the first annual Fall Symposium of the University of Philosophical Research and Philosophical Research Society. My name is Greg Salyer. I'm the president of the university, and I am so happy you're here. It's wonderful to see you. We scheduled this as close to the autumnal equinox as we could, so that's cool. Happy Rosh Hashanah, which was just ended. And I don't know if you heard, but the world was supposed to end today, but the Christian numerologist is back at his calculator. So, we live. This is our formal ceremony. After this, we hope you will just hang out and enjoy our wonderful space. We have an art exhibit in the bookstore that you're going to want to see. It's really fantastic. We have food in the library. We have drink. We have music. This is what a symposium is. Let me introduce you to our board of directors. Bill Garlington and Don DeFrancisco could not be here. James Callahan. Walther Hansel. John Pillsbury. We are a small staff. We pull off some pretty big things here. We do it because of them. Let me introduce you to them. Our event coordinator, assistant librarian, and executive assistant, Kelly Carmena. She will not be acknowledged, okay. Our director of information technology, John Chase. We keep him behind a curtain. Our director of marketing and media, Sharon Lineker. Our PRS coordinator, Roger Rodriguez. Our academic and student services coordinator, Frank Sabia. Our registrar, curriculum and instructional coordinator, and our bookstore manager, and it's his birthday, Matthew Taylor. Director of Operations, Aster Segay. Librarian, Kathy Willis. Our dean, Sharon Wright, is in the Bay Area, but she's with us in spirit today. Now, are there any faculty here? Would you please stand or make yourself known? Maybe not. Oh, yes. Hello, Athena. Any current students? Paul, you here? There's Paul, who came from Arizona to be here. We're an online school, and he has a daughter named Persephone who's here. Any other students? I can't see you for the lights. Okay, thank you. Welcome. And I know there are some alumni here. Will you please stand and make yourself known? Otherwise, make yourself known. Faculty and alumni. Chris, right over here. All right. And then to the members of our growing community of seekers, people who wander onto campus and say, what is this place? And I never knew what was here. And then you keep coming back. Welcome. A note about Dr. Obadiah Harris. Our beloved Dr. Harris, after losing his wife Jeannie this year, resigned the presidency in May. He cannot be with us here today as he's experiencing Alzheimer's and is receiving 24-hour care. In this time, when he does not communicate effectively, you will be glad to know that he remains lively, kind, generous, quick to laugh, as he always was. He was named President Emeritus unanimously by the board upon his retirement. And now a word from Manley P. Hall, whose memorial service was held on this date 27 years ago. Quote, "Education at any age is a lifelong dedication to the improvement of character and the enlargement of understanding. There is no reason why PRS should not be remembered like Plato's Academy. But if it is to continue, the society must make use of the most advanced technology available. I now envision a university of the mind, and I think that through proper organization, we can bring this message of enlightened living to a much greater audience throughout the world." John Pillsbury began reading Manley Hall, our founder, at the age of 15. He met him for the first time at the age of 17 and carried on an intermittent correspondence with Mr. Hall until John moved to Southern California in 1982. At that time, John volunteered here at PRS and became a personal friend of Manley until his death in 1990. He's continued to serve in the PRS in various capacities over the year, including administrative, technological, and photographic expertise. John Pillsbury currently serves pro bono as director of 4 nonprofit public benefit corporations and is an officer of 3, including here, also the Ventura County Gilbert and Sullivan Repertoire Company. He's the treasurer of the Arts Council of the Conejo Valley, and he is president of the Ed and H. Pillsbury Foundation. He's also past president of the United Nations Association of Los Angeles. His further interests include music, photography, loudspeaker design, computers, poetry, and of course, philosophy. John lives in Southern California with his wife, Rebecca Pillsbury. Between them, they have 5 children and 5 grandchildren. Like Manley P. Hall, John is an autodidact and polymath, a self-taught success who has wide-ranging knowledge. He can speak intelligently and thoroughly about everything from speaker design to photography techniques to the work of Manley P. Hall. He's here to do the latter with us today. Please welcome John Pillsbury with Memories of Manley P. Hall.
See if this light will come on and they help with the notes. Is there a switch on the light? And if so, there it is. Hey, it works. Now, okay, well, it's thank you for being here, and thank Greg and the rest of the board, and of course Manley for the existence of the organization you've come here to learn about. I will say in advance that although I am accustomed to being on stage, that tends to be in things like a Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. This is a very different sort of thing, and is actually a much more emotional experience for me, as I knew Manley. He was both a friend and teacher, and I think I put more pressure on myself for this than I do for almost anything. So, for better or for worse, here goes. And I could also say that given the difference in our ages, Manley, I sort of considered him a spiritual grandfather, if you will. I should note that Manley and I got our birth certificate in the same year. This is a true story. This is kind of a teaser, but I will say that I'm not 115 years old. Now, the sources that I will draw upon are, among other things, the only large-ish autobiographical work Manley ever wrote, Growing Up with Grandmother, which I highly recommend, and I would assume is available in the bookstore. Oh, yes. Yes. And the PRS Journal over the years, because there were many autobiographical bits in it. And let's see, some of the occasional correspondence I had with him, and then the many conversations and personal contact over the last 8 or so years of his life. Now, on the surface, we could say that, of course, Manley was born in 1901 and died in 1990, about 89 and a half or so. He obviously founded the PRS and was a philosopher, mystic, mason, a religious leader, and a writer who obviously had a considerable output. Now, I should note, a commercial biography was written about him which was first published in 2008 and has just been reprinted in another edition. I will not be referring to that particular work for any of my source material, and enough said. I'm not here to either endorse or tell you don't buy it or whatever. But I will be talking about some of the things relating to that. Okay, now, how would I go about, because I'm giving a lecture, knowing Manley or trying to communicate an understanding to you? Now, because of the emotional nature of the subject for me, I've written some of it down. Mostly it's notes, but not all. For Manley, the most important thing to know about any individual was the age of his soul. That is to say, what was the level of wisdom that was stored there, and as the result of its multiple incarnations. This consideration transcended all methods of understanding human beings, or more accurately, the soul was the only vehicle through which the diverse facts of an individual could be put into perspective. Though Manley wrote extensively on the arts of character delineation, and most particularly astrology, he maintained that even a natal horoscope could not be interpreted except in the context of the individual's soul. Manley believed that individual souls differed as much from one another as if each were a species unto itself. He also wrote that it would be futile to try and explain the greatness of, say, Lincoln by considering the diverse amounts of elements, e.g. carbon, nitrogen, calcium, etc., that made up his body. Which is to say that a series of facts about an individual may not necessarily explain him to you. Manley was occasionally prescient. He told me that he feared that works such as the commercial biography I referred to would, in tarnishing his memory, detract from his message. I should like to offer a poem I wrote in 1990, shortly after Manley's death, about 18 years prior to his first biography. This happens to be a Spenserian sonnet with an acrostic. I mention that because it's real hard to pick up on an acrostic unless you're reading something. It reflects the fear that Manley had communicated to me, at least in part. Make joyful shout and let the heavens ring. No lamentation fits, though life is done. Let all the joy, a privilege to sing, yet overflow that e'er lived such an one. Please let his faults, that now his course is run, alone. Such were they as of little weight. Let gently all the laurels he had won most fittingly become his last estate. Enough are they that we should celebrate, remembering the good he lived to show. Have faith that we, as he, may choose our fate and live to let our fellow creatures know. Love all begins and in it all things end. Love was the source of our departed friend. Now, presuming to describe the soul of the most remarkable person I have ever met may border on hubris, but as I have been asked to do this, I'm the last person closely associated with the PRS who knew him personally. I must do the best I can, and you're stuck with me. By the way, I have a great fondness for the myth of Parsifal. This is a slight digression. Who, of course, was the pure fool. I think I've got the fool part down. I'm still working on the other. By the way, these myths are, of course, about everybody, as they're archetypal. I should note that, which I've already referred to, there is a commercial biography of Manley and a revised version, which I've already alluded to. And in the revised version, the author described to me in a phone call prior to its publication as being more sensational than the first. I forget his exact words, but we talked quite a few times when he was gathering information. He talked to an awful lot of people. The author dug up a great amount of facts, talked to many people, including my late good friend Clark Johnston, who I'd also known since I was 15. And both Clark and I read the first version and were displeased by its contents. In addition to the facts, the author had included much hearsay, gossip, and disputable memories, which, in my opinion, tended perhaps to make the volume more sensational, which might make it more marketable. But I can't speak as to the motives of someone else authoritatively, and I don't wish to impute anything that I really do. Contrary to mine and Clark's conversational efforts, the author chose to project onto his assemblage of information a character for Manley which bore a closer resemblance to a Gilbert and Sullivan character, particularly Bunthorne from Patience or Bunthorne's Bride. Now, I don't expect any of you to be all that familiar with the operetta Patience. Is anyone? Other than my wife, who's the director of all these things. Gilbert and Sullivan wrote 14 operettas in total, and 13 of them still exist intact, and we've done all 13. However, back to Bunthorne. I should say Bunthorne is a satire of the British aesthetic movement in the 1880s when this was published. So people like Ruskin are satirized, also Swinburne. Some people think it was Oscar Wilde, but he wasn't actually very well known at the time this came out. But I won't go into any more of the history of that. Now, I'm not suggesting that the author borrowed this intentionally, because he may not. Odds are he's probably not a Gilbert and Sullivan scholar or that sort of thing. I think I do know him, as I say, I've talked to him enough to know he plays guitar and is a reporter, but as I say, I'm not. Anyway, I happen to be currently in rehearsal for this very character. The first verse of Bunthorne's initial aria, for lack of a better term, it's actually a patter song, is as follows. I may want to step back from the mic because I may blow things out a little. Yes, I am, briefly. But we perform without mics. It's not that large a theater, but people who aren't loud enough don't get to sing with us for long. If you're anxious for to shine in the high aesthetic line, as a man of culture rare, you must get up all the germs of the transcendental terms and plant them everywhere. You must lie upon the daisies and discourse in novel phrases of your complicated state of mind. The meaning doesn't matter if it's only idle chatter of a transcendental kind. And everyone will say, as you walk your mystic way, if this young man expresses himself in terms too deep for me, why, what a very singularly deep young man this deep young man must be. Thank you. Now, let's see, moving on here. Yes, the author suggested this sort of characterization as a self-pointing would-be celebrity having a great time in Los Angeles in the 1920s rather than the 1880s in England. In some of his calls to me while doing research for the first book, the author asked me if this wasn't what Manley was like. The short answer, no. From my perspective, the author made the mistake of asking himself, why would he do the things mentioned, inaccuracies aside, rather than why someone with a very different temperament and goals would do these things. The author never met Manley Hall. My reaction upon reading his version of Manley is best expressed by the poem I wrote upon reading it in 2008. When all at last is said, exhumed and brought to view, the picture that remains is not the man I knew. The soul once found in clay may not on earth abide. Events assumed as true reveal less than they hide. Twice dead upon discovery, a second dirge I sing, for all that flew to heaven and made the welkin ring. I cannot tell the ear, but only tell the heart, the dream that drove his life and set the man apart. Around every charismatic leader in the religious field, there develops a cult of personality. It is not just hero worship, however, it is also an egotistical illusion. If my teacher is greater, then I, his student, am greater. It doesn't work like that. Though some might be pleased by this mindless adulation, Manley was not. Further, people often project their own faults on their teacher in order to feel better. If my teacher has this fault, it's okay for me. Manley did not claim to be a specific reincarnation of anyone either. It's one of the things you may find various people cited as saying, never did. There were various theories, but the only, there was some who thought maybe he was Blavatsky or Albert Pike or let's see, I think his wife sometimes referred to him as the Canadian Bacon. Manley was born in Canada. Yes, not my joke. In any event, I mean, if I were to hazard a guess, which means nothing, proves nothing, I think of Socrates, both because in addition to being a philosopher, Manley was a sculptor, and he had a well-known shrewish wife. But we shall get to Marie later, but not very heavily. This is about Manley. Anyway, I had once done, to illustrate what Manley was really like, I had once done a portrait sitting of Manley and his wife, Marie, at their home. I was putting away my equipment, and Manley came out to keep me company, Marie having gone to bed. I looked over at Manley. He was seated wearing a wool robe with a hood. I commented that this would make a very interesting picture. Manley responded, "No, they would all think I studied in Tibet." The eccentricities of some of his followers sometimes showed in comic ways. Manley related in one PRS journal that a woman had actually written him asking for instruction on her nose twitching technique, a la the 1960s sitcom Bewitched. So, as I say, I'm not here to either attack any particular person who is mentioned in the book saying something that I find inconsistent, but I have to respond at least and tell you that's not how I see it. Manley had a wide variety of talents in addition to an encyclopedic knowledge and understanding of the subjects of his writings. He had a clear literary style, an uncanny ability to lecture without notes, with precision and focus, a very keen wit, a great talent for sculpture, a very good photographic eye. Manley was very certain of the eternal truths that he wished to communicate, but he could be quite unassuming personally. He once showed me a photo he had taken of a garden in Japan. He pointed at it, noting that you can even see the fish pond. I, who have seldom been able to resist a pun, said, "You're being coy." Okay, it's not a great one, but anyway. Manley replied with a childlike concern at my disbelief, "No, you really can see the fish." Most people did not seem to see his sensitive side. I am not here to discuss the particular merits of astrology, but Manley used to give 2 lectures every year based on mundane astrology, world trends and national trends, and one on natal or personal astrological trends. These were by far his best attended lectures, particularly the personal one. There was, nearly standing room only. The record of his predictions, though not perfect, contains some remarkable successes, including the fall of the Berlin Wall. I really thought that he had overreached in that. And in a series of lectures in 1941, which we do have, they're not in print, but they do still exist. It was a lecture on a series of lectures on his mundane astrological methods. He made many accurate predictions about the further conduct of World War II. Notwithstanding Manley's skill as a mundane astrologer, he always maintained that by far the surest form of prediction was karma. Gets a little scary sometimes. Similarly, his primary interest in natal astrology was for character analysis, not merely to predict the three things people most often ask an astrologer about, which is to say money, romance, and health. Carl Jung was similarly interested in astrology, and it's well documented. Now, Manley's mission, which perhaps is the only way to start to understand him, was to promote a universal philosophy and religion, not in terms of founding anything, but with the idea that every individual must progress along his own path and find his own way and understanding and of course, grow through the process. It's very similar to the old Hindu story of the blind man and the elephant. We're all approaching one reality, but in different ways, with different understandings. Now, in particular, to say one thing about the most important part in understanding Manley's approach to religion and philosophy is that he was a monist. Now, if any of you are not familiar with what a monist is, monism is the belief that all creation, everything, comes from one source and is inexorably connected. You'll find this stream in all of the world's great religions, not as necessarily the official position, but there are adherents to this in all. I should say it has nothing to do with pantheism. You're not worshiping the plant over there or the mountain or whatever, but it is an essential philosophic idea that the world is not only unified but purposeful, and that we are what happens to us is all related to that purpose. Now, I should note that among the other various principles of philosophy, such as epistemology, ontology, metaphysics, aesthetics, theurgy is one that is usually neglected in the academic sense, and is often, by the way, let's say, inadequately translated in both Webster and Oxford. The original sense of theurgy, or the divine work, is the transformation principle of what happens when you proceed to both seek understanding and to seek to manifest love for all around you, and to do something about it. It's like the three kinds of yoga: jnana, bhakti, and karma, which would be knowledge, love, and work. And for Manley, simply, you wouldn't get very far with any of them unless you were doing all three. Some of us struggle in various ways. I'm not here to express the idea that I am a paragon or any such thing, and that isn't important. It isn't even important if Manley was. The process is what's important. Now, Manley wrote about 80 books and thousands of lectures. He also wrote a few movie scripts, one of which was produced not as he had originally written it. It's an astrological murder mystery starring Anna May Wong, which I think it can be found somewhere on the internet if you look hard enough.
What's it called?
When Were You Born? Yes, thank you. I was drawing a blank there. Now, we'll talk a little about Manley's life now that we have some idea why he was here. and what his goals were. He was born in Peterborough, Ontario, in March of 1901, and was immediately pronounced dead. Anybody beginning to get what the teaser was about? So he had a death certificate. The doctor signed it, left the hospital, and he was left on a table. A nurse or someone found him alive. So obviously he continued for another 89 and a half years. But so he was born with a death certificate. His health was never all that robust. In particular, he was very close to death at 2, which you will find once again in the book Growing Up with Grandmother. He was, for the most part, raised by his, quote, esteemed grandmother, who was really a woman of an age, of bygone age, that we don't necessarily have an emotional connection to at this point in time. It's very different. She was born in, say, 1850-ish. She was one of a great intelligence and great integrity, and some interesting eccentricities, which once again I'll let the book deal with. But now you may think that Manley was successful in all of his public endeavors, but I will tell you that at the age of 8 or so, his grandmother thought he would never get the hang of needlepoint. He was quite a precocious child. I believe, and I didn't have time to find the exact reference, but that he actually read the entire Secret Doctrine, presumably understanding at the age of 12. For any of you who have read Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine, which is a little like reading Spinoza or something, it's very slow going, is most impressive. Now, in his early adult life, he and his grandmother moved around, but when he came to maturity, I think at about the age of 17 it must have been, he had an uncle who lived on Long Island who was in the insurance business in New York. It's fairly high up in one company. So Manley became a clerk in the insurance business. I should note that part of his family always was always sad that he didn't stay in the insurance business. Talk about a prophet being without honor in his own home. Anyway, of course, as many of you know, he moved to Los Angeles and became affiliated with a progressive church called the Church of the People. Now, at the age of 24, he actually had been writing before that, but at the age of 24, he started writing the Secret Teachings of All Ages book. Now, what were any of us doing at 24? Maybe useful employment. I'm sure Walter was probably more useful than I was at that age. But yeah, well, in any case, and he completed that according to the dedication of the first edition in May of 1928. So, it's for, close to 2.5 years. Now, if you go to a biography that paints him as a dilettante and a guy just having fun, this seems somehow inconsistent, because as any of you know who have read it, the breadth of knowledge, and the clear expression on the topics is most impressive, and you can't just get there because you're shamming it. He had very little formal education, as Greg was alluding to. He was self-taught, and that, at least he was alluding to about me. Perhaps I'm not docile or too incorrigible to be easily led, but this isn't necessarily virtue. In any event, he did travel the world extensively, and in 1934 he founded this organization, the Philosophical Research Society. Sometime thereafter, it doesn't matter exactly when, he married his first wife, who tragically some years later committed suicide, which was very, of course, understandably hard to deal with. But Manley never talked about that. I do know from working here before, going through old minutes, that in fact he was sort of sent on a vacation to deal with it for a time, but then he came back and wrote a whole bunch more of his more important works, Self-Unfoldment, The First Principles of Philosophy, etc. Now, in midlife, of course, Manley was working at all of this stuff. And then he at the age of 50, if I recall, married Marie Hall, who actually proposed to him. I think not to talk much about Marie, but if you are familiar with the stories of Socrates and his wife Xanthippe, this comes fairly close to the mark. In The Journey in Truth, Manley relates one story about that. It actually relates more. Socrates was talking to his disciples, and he was standing in front of their home. Now, Socrates didn't make money for teaching philosophy. He was a sculptor by trade. So his wife got angry because she thought he should be out doing something that would earn money. Oh, actually, excuse me, I got this wrong. They were inside. She picked up a broom and drove them all outside. Then he continued to discourse in front of the house to his students, which made her even more irritated. She then got a bucket of water and went to the top of the house, which presumably had a flat roof, and dumped it out on him. Socrates merely turned to his students and said, "Gentlemen, I have often observed that after it thunders, it has a tendency to rain." So, moving along, of course, he continued working and working pretty much until he ceased to be. Managed to raise the money for things like this auditorium and further additions to the property, which I think were completed in 1959. And I should in passing note that Manley had one and only one officially designated successor. That was Henry L. Drake, who was vice president of the society for a goodly number of years. Unfortunately, Dr. Drake died long before Manley did. And so, things went a different direction. But so I'm not coming here and say that I am the anointed anything. That would have been Henry Drake if there was one, and he's not there. He's not here. Now, they also endeavored to do some things along the lines of starting a school. They started a correspondence course, which was written by Manley, or occasionally by Henry Drake. In his declining years, Manley was still producing books and lectures, and near the end of his life, I'd say about 3 years or so, he hired a management team. Remember the chronology? About. Yeah, Yeah, there won't be a test in the morning. Manley, and I talked to him privately about it, both when he did it and later had occasion to speak to him after it had been going a while. And he originally said that this was his experiment and he would supervise them. Well, it seemed reasonable. Then Manley had a stroke. He was not all that able to supervise. Now, as I say, I'm not going to go into this in great detail, but they got an imbalance on the board. People were, there were some existing trustees who didn't like the changes, and they departed, and then they put other people on. By the time Manley died, of the, let's see, I'm thinking 10 people on the board, all but 3 of them were either employed or closely allied to those who were. Now, and Walther can correct me, that's not quite proper under corporate law. Now, it's not to say, this is a long time ago, and it's not to say that that invalidates the decision, other than a later, more properly constituted board can overturn it. But there were a lot of problems, if you will. And I was asked to join the board, and it didn't look good. I had had some experience in other organizations, and Walter, I'm not going into this in detail. I'm just trying to set the stage for Obadiah's arrival. I don't want to steal your thunder, but in any event, I may note, actually, Manley was helping promote Marie's works. He was on a trip in Sedona when he had the stroke. But Marie's a whole other subject, which is too voluminous for today. Anyway, he became dependent on the managers, and at some point, later, I asked him in private, do you like the results of your experiments so far? Would you like some of us to try and do something to support you if you wish to make a change? His answer was not to defend the management team, but rather to say, I just want to write the books I can in the time I have left, of course implying it wasn't very long. Now, as a result of Manley's passing, having run the PRS for 56 odd years, there was a tremendous vacuum. Now also, since some of the more experienced trustees were leaving, things didn't look particularly good, and I had some background in nonprofits that were in crisis, and I couldn't see any way to do the kind of things that I thought needed to be done in terms of, if I joined the board, could I get enough votes to do what I thought should happen? Short answer, no. I could depend on 3 other people on the board, my late friend Clark Johnston, the late Gerald Brill, and Manley's doctor, at least occasionally, Dr. Evarts Loomis. Those 3 were all men of very fine character and not terribly experienced in the realm of corporate problem solving at the board level. Well, I could have easily declined. The problem, and I thought that if I do get into this, I may fail. But it was not a difficult decision, simply because if I tried and failed, well, I had tried. If I didn't try, I couldn't live with it. In any event, so I decided to join the board in the hope that if this were important, something would develop that would provide an opportunity to actually do what needed to be done. To make that story very short, the opportunity appeared as Obadiah. And I will let Walter deal with that. But in conclusion, I will say that Manley's greatest regret, which he often voiced in private and never in public, was that of all the wealthy people he had helped, he did a lot of personal counseling and other such things. None of them had bothered to make a significant financial contribution to help the society. However, I should note that the dedication of some people of lower means was truly the widow's mite, which of course Manley would appreciate, being both biblical and Masonic. I might mention, I think his name was Ernie, a retired man who washed dishes so that he could contribute here. He also took tickets frequently. It's humbling. Anyway, the PRS, it was and is dedicated to the truth seekers of all nations, and we cannot really depend on charisma or wait for a great leader, nor should we. I should note that Krishnamurti often asked, or had posed the question in one of his books, why do you want a guru? And his answer was, because you don't trust your judgment. The most important part of my talk on Manley is not who Manley was, but why. Thank you.
should make it clear it's not required of our speakers to sing, but that was fantastic. Yeah, I scheduled you after him. Me, yes. Walther Hansel is the chair of our board of directors. He attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison and graduated from the University of Illinois in Urbana in 1984 with a degree in economics, and most of his studies were in demography, geography, and Mandarin Chinese. Did not know that. While there, he worked in rare book preservation at the Rare Book Room of the university, one of the finest rare book libraries around, giving him a heightened appreciation for the PRS library and its specialized collection of unique and irreplaceable works made available for study. Walther graduated from the University of California, Berkeley Law School in 1984, having never met a lawyer before attending law school, nor setting foot in California. He notes that he imagined lawyers did a lot of reading and writing. Walter's been with the same law firm since he started in that line of work in 1984. Before that, he worked in college and high school as a house painter, a janitor, a cashier, a dishwasher, a teacher, a licensed and registered investment advisor, and a survey researcher. Mr. Hansel joined the board of directors for PRS in 1992 and serves as our chair and legal counsel. Walther is also a board member at other for-profit and nonprofit enterprises and a trustee for a few charitable and commercial family trusts. He notes that his wife Amy allowed him to marry her in 1989, and they have an adult daughter and son. They have a rescued greyhound at home who's not well today, so thoughts for him, and currently 3 long-lived snakes as pets. Walther is a kind and generous chair and director, along with being a fierce defender of our mission and a devoted supporter of our work. To speak on beginning and sustaining a university, the tenure of President Emeritus Obadiah Harris, please welcome Walther Hansel.
It's very good to have you all here today. Thank you, Greg, for that introduction. I am grateful for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and what that means to me. The pursuit of happiness is doing the right thing. So it's not sort of gaiety, but that's what it means to me. Obadiah Harris, I first met as a corporate lawyer in nonprofit work, and he recruited me to help him when he was asked to join the board of Philosophical Research Society after the death of Manley Hall. That was really a time of turmoil, and he looked very cautiously on the way in at whether it was something that he should do. Manley Hall was really a one-of-a-kind person who made a huge contribution to the world. He coming into it, and I had not met Manley Hall during his lifetime. I would say, in illustration of what John was talking about, he hit a point later in life where he was really afflicted with some parasites, and they had come into a position of considerable influence in his life and in this organization's life. And there were also at the same time people who were of impeccable character, dedicated and loyal to the principles that Manley Hall had spent his life sharing. And it was really just a rat's nest of a situation. So I helped Obadiah, I hope, understand that he had the courage and the fortitude to step into that, and for him to do the right thing that he wanted to do. He gave, so he came in, and as I said, I at the beginning was really a hired corporate lawyer, and a couple of months into getting acquainted with what was happening at PRS, I recognized that one of the biggest problems for the organization was sort of the parasites feeding at the trough, and these factions and people who had no concern for the future of the organization, and that if I kept sort of doing my corporate lawyer thing, I would be another parasite feeding at the trough. So I suggested to Obadiah, as he had become president and was reorganizing, that I did not want to work in that capacity anymore for PRS, because it was the really opposite of what was needed, which was to conserve resources, clean things up, and take the best and move to the future. So Obadiah had for those who aren't personally familiar, he was a lifelong, dedicated, committed student of philosophy in Eastern and Western and philosophy around the world. And he was a combination of a rigorous academic in the Western conventional sense, highly educated. He had a master's degree in education from University of Arizona and a PhD in education from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. He had been involved in his lifetime in a lot of teaching, a lot of big institution university administration, and also esoteric study and learning and a devotion to spiritual growth, both his own and other people's. He was really a great person to try to carry things forward or lead others in carrying things forward at the Philosophical Research Society. He recognized that Manley Hall was a one of a kind, and it would not be feasible to try and be Manley Hall or be the replacement or be like him, but more to uphold the principles and the spirit of learning and investigation and wisdom and sharing. And it took a few years for Obadiah to right the ship with help from a lot of people, here and no doubt people here in the room. John Pillsbury helped us particularly in, we had a conundrum of how to get rid of the rat's nest when their hands were on the controls of the corporate entity. And John helped with that by being a part of the understanding that Obadiah sought with this board, which was he will come in for no pay and to devote himself to turning things around, and that he needed to re-examine the makeup of the board and start fresh and essentially give the parasites a free pass to, get out of town, and we won't try to put you in jail, more or less, roughly speaking. And John was a part of the transitional game with the parasite faction, which is to get them to accept the proposition that one way or another they had to go, and that as part of that, the whole board was going to start over. So John, who was really one of the most critical links to the proper history and the true spirit of this organization, left the board at that time as a means of getting the bad guys to go away, which worked, and they did, and we were able to start over. And John has been a loyal and dedicated supporter in every different capacity, both before then and after then, and since then and to today, and was a trusted advisor to Dr. Harris when he was president, and we're very glad to have John formally rejoin the board last year after serving in a sort of an unofficial capacity of great responsibility for all these years. So we were very fortunate with that, and Dr. Harris looked at carrying forward the best of PRS, making sure that the publications of Manley Hall stayed in print and were more widely disseminated. One of the things that got me kind of hooked on the way into this was this book Manley Hall had written, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, which, as a book lover like me, who could fail to say, I got to find out what that's about? I mean, one book, and it's The Secret Teachings of All Ages. Who could ask for more? So Dr. Harris got a big-time publisher, Tarcher Penguin, which became part of Random House, to do a sort of a more affordable version of that book that was, small enough that you could pick it up and put it in a briefcase or something, and get it out to more people in the world, which was a success and has had translations in many languages, and it's all about getting the word out more, and tried to keep the whole publication catalog in print, and that's something that in particular has been an interest of John, again, in supporting over the years, that has made a world of difference. Some of my personal favorites were one of Manley Hall's few works of ostensible fiction called Very Unusual, which is a retelling of tales of as if he were an antique collector in Japan having a lot of adventures with mysterious goings-on. It's really fun, and I learned a lot from it at the same time, and maybe most of you are familiar with the booklet called 10 Rules for Better Living, which to me almost, if I never read anything for the rest of my life, I could just refer to that, and it kind of covers most things of importance, and it's pretty short. But in addition to preserving and carrying forward the best of Manley Hall's contributions to the world and this organization, Obadiah looked at something that had been a goal or an ambition of Manley Hall in his lifetime, that John also referred to, about a university, and was able to identify that when Manley Hall founded the Philosophical Research Society, he built into the nonprofit corporate charter for that one of its purposes could be and would be to have a university dedicated to the dissemination of wisdom of cultures throughout history and around the world, and to serve truth seekers everywhere. And that was the formal constitution or establishment of the University of Philosophical Research. That was about the year 2000. Obadiah, with his kind of industrial strength, institutional background, got the state licensing as an honest-to-God university with degree granting authority. We have the ability to confer bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees. It began with studies in transformational psychology and masters of consciousness, which, again, for me to participate in that, just the idea that we would take that seriously and advanced it as as an organized mission to say people will be able to study and have a legitimate higher educational degree of a master's in consciousness. What a wonderful idea. So that was a happy thing. And then Obadiah pursued with the whole team, of course, the accreditation at the Distance Education Accreditation Council, and that was again an institutional recognition in the sort of staid conventional educational world that a digital online school was the future of learning for many people in many contexts, not the only version and not a substitute or a universal replacement for attending a college campus, but one of the miracles of the technological age that we're in is that so much knowledge can be made available in so many different ways and without people having to go somewhere and go through all the logistics of transportation and living and everything to have access to information. So I understand the mission of the university as the conservation of wisdom traditions from around the world, from all of history, from all cultures. I'm sure we've all seen that there are many consistencies or rhymes or convergences of the best learning of religions and cultures around the world. And there certainly are differences in doctrine and differences in geography and culture, but there is a higher direction that we can all aspire to. I think of a University of Philosophical Research as and a wisdom school as a sort of like a seed bank for culture, taking the best of everywhere and making sure it's available and is preserved and can be shared and can be carried on. When I was in school in biology, we were taught phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny, which is, not to get too Latin about it, but the idea that the evolution of a whole spectrum of living creatures is sort of re-experienced in the developmental process of each individual as it grows, or at least for multicellular organisms. And I think there's something similar with people and cultures, which is we all start out knowing not a whole lot. And maybe with Manley Hall's view of reincarnation and what's the age of a soul, maybe some people are born with more experience than others. And I'm not sure how all that works, but it's still the case that for a lot of us, we're kind of starting from scratch, but we have the benefit of parents or families or the community and really the culture around us, and that the development of culture should and often does carry forward the kind of cumulative learning and benefit and common sense that you might consider to be wisdom. So I think our school here and what all of us and what all of you are participating in is a high level of aspiration and service to ourselves and our fellow people. And the educational process could be, in large part, talking about sort of that evolutionary development. It's the unfoldment of the self. And in my imperfect understanding, that's something that I tried to grasp from the works of Mr. Hall. And I think with the University of Philosophical Research, we are we've extended the contributions that began with Mr. Hall to enabling and assisting and supporting and interested people unfolding their selves. And to me, that's, I started talking about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and pursuit of happiness as in doing the right thing. And I think the unfoldment of the self that education supports, and sharing that with others is a big piece of doing the right thing. So I feel great about what we're doing here. I don't know, Greg, if you have anyone appointed to introduce yourself. Well, many of you may know Greg, but I don't have his full story here to tell you with me, but I will say it was a stroke of providence that he came in contact with the PRS. I think Obadiah Harris, the president, quickly recognized here was a unique individual, someone who resonated very well with the principles of this organization, and that we got better acquainted over a period of time, and Greg gave of himself very generously to be available in a time of need when, as he had said, we had our president, Obadiah, had a sort of a series of hard hits in life coming at the same time. And I should say my fellow director, Jim Callahan, and I spent a few minutes with Obadiah this morning before coming over here, and although he wasn't able to be here, and it would just be a kind of a rough ride for him to be in a situation like this. I mean, just a body count like this would be too much for him at this point. But he was in good spirits. He was very happy to hear what we are doing here and what John and what Greg are doing here. And he is with the loss of his wife and his health difficulties, particularly in the last year. That was after 27 years of working here at this place every single day for 27 years. Never would accept payment, but just wanted to have us carry on together. And that's still what he wants, and he was in good spirits, and as Greg said, he's quick to laugh, and sometimes you laugh when it hurts, you know, but also because he appreciates the miraculous quality of life that we exist, that we're here, that we can be together and work on good things together. So he urged us to carry on. We're very fortunate to have Greg with us. I hope I get on another occasion to give the more informed story of everything that he has brought to us here. But we're very glad and very fortunate to have Greg with us. And if you have more to say, I guess this is a good time.
They get to hear me every Tuesday night, Walter, so they've had enough. I always forget where the switch is. Anyway. All right. Thank you both. John Pillsbury, would you come forward to receive the Doctor of Humane Letters? James Callahan will assist. John Pillsbury, for your appreciation for and love of Manley P. Hall and his vision, for your enormous contributions to the legacy of Manley P. Hall's work through publications and media, for your steadfast and profound support of the Philosophical Research Society and the University of Philosophical Research, for the depth and breadth of your devotion to PRS and UPR, for your brilliant mind, open heart, and generous support, and with unanimous vote of the directors, as president of this institution and on behalf of its community of seekers, it gives me great pride to present you with the Doctor of Humane Letters honoris causa from the University of Philosophical Research. Congratulations. Walther Hansel, stay standing. Please come forward. Walther Hansel, for your appreciation for and love of Manley P. Hall, Obadiah Harris, and their vision, for your countless hours of pro bono work on behalf of this institution for a quarter century, for your intelligence, practicality, and guiding hand in directing PRS-UPR through its board for 25 years, for your deep and profound dedication to fairness, justice, and the perseverance and success of this institution, for your sound wisdom, benevolent spirit, and gracious leadership, and with the unanimous vote of the directors, as president of this institution and on behalf of its community of seekers, it gives me great pride to present you with the Doctor of Laws honoris causa from the University of Philosophical Research. Congratulations. Let me tell you about the future. Well, our future. I assumed the presidency in June. I thought maybe by Christmas I'd be able to tell these gentlemen something had happened, things were moving. It started in about 2 weeks. That's because of our staff and the support of this fantastic board. The future is now. This is our organizational chart. The first thing we did was restructure our institution to make every position full-time and professional. And so you'll see here the people I introduced you to before. These are all professional full-time positions with, as you can see, quite a lot of responsibilities. Dean Sharon Wright, who's not here, came on as our Chief Academic Officer. Her history, her background is writing compliance, responding to compliance. See, I'm not even sure exactly what she does, but it's boring and tedious, and it involves compliance with environmental regulations. She's in charge of our compliance with our accreditor. So she does not fear this, she relishes it, and she's already doing a great job for us. I want to introduce to you David Orr, right here. David, would you stand up? David serves as our curator and artist in residence. You may have heard him speak on his work, which is fantastic, and he has one piece. He did this whole exhibit. He put up only one piece of his in there. It's worth looking at. His talk was, and his exhibit, his own work is called Illumined. And what David does is really fantastic. He's a photographer. He's got his camera with him now. He takes photographs of our books, Manley Hall's books in the library, and he manipulates them into these incredible works of art. Please go to the bookstore and look at Blavatsky's work. in David's hands. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you, David, for the art exhibit and for your work for us. A longtime friend of PRS is going to help us with admissions and recruiting students to our university. We've never done that. We just thought you would come to us. We're going to try to ask some people to come here. We've increased our events quite a bit. Some of you are here because of that. The Tuesday President's class has been growing. It started with a group of 10. We regularly now get 35 people here on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. It was 1 year ago, by the way. So this coming Tuesday is the last of our Passages series, and it marks the end of 1 year since I've been giving lectures on Tuesday night for free. This community is fantastic. I urge you to come if you're in the area and you can. It's a growing community. We're really good with each other. We're very careful, but we're also very fierce in our pursuit of wisdom. It's wonderful. We've been doing second Saturdays this year, and it's a faculty showcase. Our faculty have lectured and demonstrated their expertise. We've got 3 more of those coming up. And next year, I think we're going to do something similar, except perhaps just have open houses. Just open up the campus on a weekend, let you come hang out. And maybe I'll be here and I can talk to you. Maybe we'll have some other faculty. So look for that next year. We continue our workshops with the brilliant Jonathan Young, who worked with Joseph Campbell. He comes down, did one last Saturday, in fact, called Finding Your Way Home. Yolanda Robinson. We also now have sound baths. That's right, we do. Kristen here has been offering sound baths, and people love it. I guess I'm going to have to try it, Kristen. Our great event, some of you were here, was Twin Peaks. The room was full, and for good reason. It's a brilliant television show, and we had a very nice panel to talk about some really interesting things. I had a blast. I love this image because you see the character, the fireman there, and if you look at the front row, you can see the silhouette of his bald head. He was here. So we had a cast member come, and we talked about this amazing show. We're going to look for more opportunities like that. We're not just going to talk about anything, but if there's a film or a television show that touches upon our mission, which is about wisdom and myth and mystery, we're going to be there, and we're going to talk about it with you. We initiated a partnership with the Relativity School that's working out quite well. Relativity, as you can see here, is a studio school for students who want to go into the industry, as we say here. If you go home tonight and watch a film, there's a good chance you'll see the Relativity Media logo come up on your film. They've done a lot of work. They are now the Los Angeles Center Studios downtown, but they started a school when they were Relativity. They ask us to provide academic content to their general education, and in turn, they provide us studio quality media. They're here today. That's the guys behind the camera, students at Relativity. Yes, the library, our gem, that's G-E-M. You can't work out in there. Cataloging has been an issue for us. We have this marvelous collection, but we haven't cataloged it. That's what happens when you start collecting in 1934. It's really hard to turn all that into electronic data. We've had tremendous help from the Virginia S. Warner Foundation, and in fact, just yesterday, we got another generous contribution from Virginia, and her colleague, Mark Marins, is here, and he has a word to you from Virginia. Come on up, Mark.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks, Greg, and thanks, everyone, for being here today, and thanks for the incredible history and legacy that all of you have contributed to for humanity. Virginia Warner has been my best friend and partner for over 40 years, and she wanted to express her unhappiness and sorrow for not being here today. She had family matters that she had to attend to, so she wanted to share a few words with you guys. About 30 years ago, Virginia was in a past life regression therapy session. And when she came to, she shouted the word Obadiah. This was 30 years ago. And the therapist had no idea what that meant. She had no idea what that meant. Now, had she come to and said John Smith, no big deal, right? But Obadiah is an unusual name. Well, the magic and the uncertainty and the mystery of all that stayed with her for many, many, many decades. About 5 years ago, we were having a conversation, and I mentioned to her that I had come here to PRS to spend time with my dear friend. And her and I have a long history of esoteric studies together. And she said, well, who runs the Philosophical Research Society? And I said, Dr. Obadiah Harris. And she screamed so loud that I dropped the phone. When I picked it up, she was sobbing, and she said, finally. She showed up 2 days later, and we drove over, walked into Dr. Harris's office. And typical for him, he looked at her, the first thing he said was, what took you so long? So that actually began the relationship that Virginia and I have had in helping this institution with the remarkable collection that Manley so remarkably and incredibly gathered over the years. So this is the message that Virginia wanted me to share with you. Manley P. Hall was an inspiration and mentor to me beginning at age 14 when I began studying the world of wisdom studies with teachings such as Krishnamurti, Madame Blavatsky, and many other sources of inspiration. During that time, I came upon the secret teachings of all ages, noted in my grandmother, Mary Mellon's writings, and was amazed at its depth and breadth of knowledge and wisdom. My grandmother, Mary Mellon, was similarly inspired by Carl Jung nearly a century ago, and after supporting him in his work for many years, my grandmother created the Bulletin Press and published 31 esoteric books. I feel so blessed and honored to follow in her footsteps with the trail she blazed so many years ago. She was empowered by people like Manley, as am I, and this is the reason why I have supported the library and PRS as the world which is in such peril needs and more importantly deserves the information he has gleaned over his decades of gathering the treasures of wisdom of humankind. The Virginia S. Warner Foundation's effort to digitize his work and the contents of the library can and will facilitate this, ultimately allowing anyone around the planet to access his collection and teachings. Manley P. Hall and this institution is a cherished reflection of a philosophical and spiritual lineage I'm so very humbled to be a part of. All of you are my true spiritual family. Thank you.
We continue, PRS continues to produce and disseminate the work of Manley Hall. We are just now in talks with a company that's an Audible platform, like Audible, but a different platform. This platform includes catalogs of people like Pema Chodron, Ram Dass, teachers like Manley Hall about the world's wisdom. It looks like we'll be working with them to distribute Manley's audio lectures to an even greater audience now. Our bookstore, if you haven't been there in a while, go in and look. Not only is the art exhibit there, we're sprucing it up, making it a little brighter, a little more open. I keep wanting to open a coffee shop, but I keep being told I can't do that, but we'll keep at it. You may or not know may or may not know that there's a building behind us. It's used for storage right now. In fact, it has right now 9 animal heads in it. Don't ask. But we have decided, with David's help and Roger Rodriguez's help, to turn that into an art gallery. So there will be art here at PRS. Again. In terms of the curriculum, we've been going through it. We have now a quality assurance process that we use to make sure that we are using best practices, that our accreditor likes what we're doing. Our accreditor is good. We want to work with them. We're also accelerating this process, this quality assurance process, so that when students end a quarter, they may immediately turn and look to the next quarter and look inside the courses they would like to take. Those courses will be ready for you as soon as you finish. We are refreshing the curriculum. You see Chris Sheridan's marvelous course here that's in the works. Cinema of Transformation is one of those courses like, why haven't we been doing this for years? Chris is doing a great job with it. We've got other new courses coming online. Like I said, we're refreshing the curriculum with new faculty and new approaches. This is boring but important. If you're a student here, you have struggled to get your grades. They came, I think, in a spreadsheet, right? Not good. Your permanent record has been kind of hit or miss. We have just this week adopted a student information system so that there will be a student portal. You can go in and see everything you've done, your grades, and we can print a transcript from it. I know that sounds basic, but we actually haven't been able to do that before. Also, faculty will be able to go in through the faculty portal and assign those grades. So, yeah, that's pretty good. If you're a faculty member, you've been using the wonderful learning management system, Moodle, but you've been using a very old version. It can be frustrating, I know. We now have hosting of our Moodle site in Scotland, of all places, and it is updated. They will update it for us, back it up and everything. You're going to find, students and faculty, you're going to find this a much smoother, more welcoming experience. We also had 2 different installations. It's now 1 installation. Notice there you also have a faculty center. So we're going to have the faculty in one place for you to talk to each other, to get announcements, to share pedagogical strategies, etc. Yes. We also have a new website. Hang on. Yes, and calm down. Sorry, display issues. All right, so if you saw our old website, you saw the 37 or so menu items. Some of them repeated that could make it a little difficult to navigate. Our new website has 3 entry points: what we do, who we are, and join us. And so everything works from there. And let me just show it to you briefly. You will see here we now have Kathy Willis, our librarian, doing a blog about what we have in the library. You're going to like this. Our events now are hosted on Eventbrite, and they feed directly into our main webpage, so you see what's coming up. Oh, look, there we are today. And you see that Tuesday night, we'll be talking about the hero with 1,000 faces. And some more information here, but the thing that matters most for our users of the website is that currently you had the university website, you had a PRS website that was separate, you had a bookstore website that sold Manley Hall books that itself was separate, and they were not integrated at all. Now they are. Here's what we do. There are degree programs. Here's what's happening on our Los Feliz campus. There are our events. Here's our library. There's Manley. And you can buy his books now directly off the website. And there's our bookstore. Okay,
Much improved.
good. Sorry. This is Constellation. It is our new undergraduate degree program. Currently, we have a degree completion program, meaning that we can't admit you unless you already have an associate's degree or 2 years of credits. We want to expand that. We want to make our courses and our program and our mission available to everyone. So we need a lot more courses, 100 and 200 level. We're calling this Constellation. We want to make it practical. So what do you do? What do you need at the general education level? What do you need for a bachelor's degree? You need to think. You need to understand. You need to apply, create, live, and integrate. So we're going to create new courses under the think category. And you see some of what's going on there. We're going to create new courses under the understand category, that is sciences basically, but also computing. Apply, ethics, business, politics, leadership. Create, writing, art, dance, music, digital, virtual. Live, the self, the group, the past, culture, and meaning. That's our bread and butter. But here's what I really like: integrate. So students will take 5 courses that connect, see, Constellation, you're connecting, that connect those other areas. And they work with faculty individually or in groups to create interdisciplinary connections between those things. There's Constellation. Oh, sorry, got to do this thing again. I'm almost done, hang on. So, for the future, our new motto, our slogan, our tagline, whatever, is practical and profound wisdom for the 21st century. I think John will agree that Manley was nothing if not practical about daily life and living well. We want to emphasize that because we think it's needed more than ever. What does it mean to deliver practical and profound wisdom for the 21st century? It means we draw upon the best that has been thought, said, and written, regardless of where it originates on the planet or when it appeared in history. It means learning to exorcise the ghosts of the past that haunt us. It means learning to face a future that is uncertain at best and threatening at worst. It means learning to cherish the sacred present in its fullness and fleetingness. It means learning to navigate and resist state systems that betray their creed of promoting the general welfare and providing for the security and safety of their citizens. It means learning to live with one another despite and even because of our differences, because we recognize that ultimately we are all walking each other home. It means learning to live with fullness and intention while valuing emptiness and loss. It means celebrating and cultivating the sacred and making meaning out of it. It means, in a word, philosophia, the love of wisdom. Thank you for your attention today. This